The Dog That Never Returns Alone. Prologue, a haunting prelude. There was the sound of ragged, uneven breathing and the slow, deliberate thudding of footsteps on creaky wooden floors. The air was thick with darkness, broken only by the rhythmic dripping of water in the background. Jack, his shirt soaked in sweat and streaked with blood, retreated slowly into his kitchen. His hand, trembling violently, gripped a small knife, and his terrified eyes refused to leave the open doorway ahead. From outside, otherworldly whispers filled the air. "You can't run. You've been chosen." Suddenly, sharp footsteps echoed from upstairs. The sound of claws scraping against the floorboards sent a chill racing down his spine. Jack, screaming, "Who's there?" Before he could take another breath, the lights flickered and went out. In the faint reflection of the window, a distorted face emerged, its hollow black eyes staring back at him like gateways to an abyss. 1 week earlier, just 7 days before that horrifying night, Jack had been living a peaceful, mundane life. He came home from work one evening, exhausted, only to notice something strange. The gate to his yard was wide open, and his dog, Rocky, was nowhere to be found. Panicked, Jack grabbed a flashlight and ventured into the nearby woods, calling Rocky's name into the darkness. The forest, normally alive with chirping insects and rustling leaves, was eerily silent. There was no sound at all, only a suffocating, unnatural stillness. After what felt like an eternity, Rocky appeared in the distance, emerging from the shadows. But something about him was different. His walk was slow and awkward, almost as if he was relearning how to move. He didn't bark in excitement like he usually did when Jack called his name. When Jack knelt to inspect him, his unease deepened. Rocky's fur was smeared with dark, sticky marks that looked disturbingly like handprints. Despite his rising dread, Jack took the dog home, convincing himself that everything was fine. Signs of a nightmare. The following night, Jack began noticing strange phenomena that defied explanation. 1. The glowing forest. In the middle of the night, he woke to see a faint, bluish glow seeping through his bedroom curtains. When he peeked outside, he saw what looked like silent, flickering flames dancing deep within the forest. 2. The whispers. As he lay in bed, Jack heard faint murmurs coming from the living room. When he went to investigate, he found Rocky sitting motionless in the dark, staring intently at the blank wall. 3. The eyes. One day, while trying to comfort the increasingly distant Rocky, Jack noticed his dog's eyes had changed. They were pitch black, bottomless voids devoid of life or reflection. The thought crept into Jack's mind, "This isn't my dog," but he forced himself to dismiss it, chalking it up to paranoia. The house turns hostile. By the third day, it wasn't just Rocky that seemed different. The house itself began to change. Unseen footsteps. During the day, Jack heard heavy footsteps creaking above him, even though he lived alone, shifting objects. Furniture began moving on its own. He would find his living room chair positioned to face the front door, no matter where he left it. The mirrors. One night, while washing up in the bathroom, he caught a glimpse of Rocky standing behind him in the mirror. But when he spun around, there was nothing there. The forest's dark secrets. Determined to find answers, Jack ventured back into the woods late one night. The air was colder than it should have been, and the silence pressed against him like a physical weight. As he walked, he heard faint, familiar voices, calling his name, his wife's voice, though she had been dead for years. Shadows moved in the periphery of his vision, humanoid shapes that moved with grotesque, jerky motions. Eventually, Jack stumbled upon a clearing unlike any he'd seen before. The ground was littered with tiny brittle bones, likely from small animals. In the center was a blood-red circle, painstakingly drawn into the dirt. Within the circle stood a small statue of a dog that looked exactly like Rocky. To Jack's horror, the statue wasn't just lifelike, it was bleeding. Rocky reveals the truth. Jack returned home, his mind racing, but as he stepped inside, his heart sank. Rocky was standing in the kitchen, his head tilted unnaturally to the side, his mouth hanging open in a grotesque imitation of a smile. Before Jack could speak, Rocky spoke first, in a voice that was warped, guttural, and distinctly inhuman. "You shouldn't have brought me back. We chose him for you." As Jack watched in horror, Rocky's body began to distort. His limbs stretched unnaturally long, cracking as they extended. His skin split open, revealing pulsating, dark tissue beneath. His black eyes glowed with a fiery red hue. Jack bolted upstairs and barricaded himself in his bedroom, but the sound of claws scratching violently at the door followed him. The scratches grew louder, more frenzied, until it sounded like dozens of creatures were clawing at the wood, desperate to get in. The curse. Unveiled. In desperation, Jack contacted an elderly local woman named Mrs. Harleen, known for her knowledge of the supernatural. Over the phone, Harleen revealed a chilling truth. The forest had been cursed for centuries, ever since a failed ritual was conducted there to summon a malevolent entity known as the Shadow Beyond. Animals, especially dogs, were used as vessels for the entity to cross into the human world. "Rocky is no longer your dog," Harleen warned. "He is their messenger now." The final confrontation. Armed with this knowledge, Jack returned to the clearing one last time. The circle was still there, but now it was surrounded by shadowy figures, with elongated limbs and empty faces. At the center stood Rocky, or what had become of him. His monstrous form loomed, his fiery eyes burning with malice. Jack began reciting a banishment incantation Harleen had given him. The ground quaked, and the shadows shrieked in agony. But the ritual demanded a sacrifice. Jack realized, too late, that the price of closing the gate was his own life. As the shadows lunged toward him, he plunged his knife into his chest, shouting the final words. Epilogue. The gate remains. The next morning, Jack's house stood eerily quiet and abandoned. Yet, locals claimed to see a lone black dog sitting outside the house at night, its glowing red eyes cutting through the darkness. If you listen closely, they say, you can hear faint whispers carried on the wind. The gate is closed, but the key still remains.